Good morning, everyone. We are back, and actually, we missed Friday. And Jed, Jimmy, and I are back from Africa. Spent a whole week over in Nairobi. We actually had no connections to the NFL, so we just sat there listening to it online on radio the entire time. So, Jed, good morning to you.
Good morning.
Yeah, welcome back. We're excited to hear about the trip too. So, welcome.
Thanks. Back. It's sometimes sad to miss week one when you're away, but I realize even when you're trying to watch it on YouTube TV, because you're international, they won't let you watch the games there.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Hey, with that said, it was just a great week one. There was a lot of surprises. There were a lot of upcoming stories. As usual, player emerged that it was not on anyone's draft radar. So let's go through that and talk. Actually, I want to start off talking about notable injuries. Jed, I'm going to start with you. Jerry Judy was carted off the field with a high ankle sprain, and it looks like he is actually going to be out for about 8 weeks. Thoughts on Jerry Judy and also potential replacements in Ken Hamler as well as Tim Patrick and the Cortland Sutton?
Yeah, so Cortland Sutton has been coming back from injury as well. So that was a big one. I have Jerry Judy. But yeah, I think you look to Sutton. Tim Sutton, if you guys remember, had a couple great games last year. So I think he's good. But, also as Jimmy's going to get to with waiver wire pickups, I think there are some other options at the wide receiver position you can look to as well. But high ankle sprains are really difficult because even if he comes back after 8 weeks, they're usually a little bit tentative. So for me, this is probably I might not even stash him on my IR. I might actually just drop him.
Jed, just so you know, it looks like from what they said, he has a similar high ankle sprain as what Michael Thomas did. And look what happened to Michael Thomas last year.
Yeah, exactly. Those high ankle sprains, I don't see those as, being able to return fairly quickly, something that lingers with you. And so I'm definitely concerned.
Are you high on Cortland Sutton at all? Do you think that he can regain the form from a couple of years ago?
That's the key. Is I was before, but he hasn't looked the same. So I also, again, coming back from injury, I feel like he's not, do you guys know what injury he had? Was it ACL?
I don't know, but I'll check.
Yeah. So that's the
thing. Tore his ACL.
Yeah, see, so when you tear, I've done the same thing. And so it takes a little bit to mentally be confident. And so I feel like he's not there yet, but once he gets there, he could be a buy low candidate right now because the attempts are going to be there. And so it could be someone you can get snagged quickly now.
Jim, going to the Washington football team is a team that I love, that we love Ryan Fitzpatrick. I picked up Terry McLaurin in a lot of my leagues. I picked up Antonio Gibson in a lot of my leagues.
Logan Thomas.
Logan Thomas.
Ryan Fitzpatrick believes he did not completely dislocate his hip like Tua did in college, but he has a similar injury, which will probably keep him out at least 8 weeks or longer. Thoughts on that, as well as prognosis on how it affects the other players?
Well, I think one of the things we were talking about right before we jumped on this taping is the Washington Redskins injury to Ryan Fitzpatrick maybe had the most effect from a fantasy standpoint on most of the team. Because you're right, like Antonio Gibson was supposed to have a breakout year. Terry McLaurin was supposed to have a breakout year. Logan Thomas was supposed to have a breakout year. And that entire offense in terms of speed and the people that they have is really built around Ryan Fitzpatrick. And so now that you've lost him for 8 weeks, I feel like it's going to take at least a few weeks at a minimum for them to get adjusted, right? So I do think that you're still going to see decent production coming from Antonio Gibson. There's a part of me that's a little worried about what's going to happen to the receivers and the tight end, because whereas Fitzpatrick goes downfield and throws some of these long bombs and is able to throw some good balls to these receivers, Heineke's not the same. You're going to see more short, down the middle passes. And from a fantasy standpoint, I feel like if you were to redraft now, you might look at a person like Terry McLaurin going further down the draft board.
Yeah, we'll see. I agree. I think that was the biggest storyline this weekend is the Washington team players. And, I don't know, though. I would just say this Heineke guy, you never know. He's a second year, I believe. A crazy story. My oldest son loves his story. And if you remember last year, he almost beat Tampa Bay. That Washington with Heineke as replacement, they were the team that came the closest to beating Tampa Bay. So you just never know. I agree, it's a little bit tentative. I have Logan Thomas on a couple teams, but I'm going to ride it out because it could be if you're willing to bet or if you need to make a big swing. Again, these could be buy low candidates, but I do think there's a risk because all the Washington players will go down.
Are you hoping that they'll sign Cam Newton here, Jed?
I'm not. I was just saying, I actually think this will be, I think they won't sign Cam Newton, and that will be the flag to the rest of the league that Cam Newton is done, which is amazing to me because he's only 34 years old. But I personally don't think they will, but we'll see.
Well, I'm reading the news yesterday. Ron Rivera, the coach of the Washington football team, he did come out yesterday and says they are not looking to sign another quarterback.
Yeah, because actually, if Heineke doesn't do well, Kyle Allen actually is pretty well as well, too. And he's been part of Ron Rivera's system for a long, long time. Jim, Raheem Mostert, look, I personally like Raheem Mostert. I was trying to trade him, but he gets injured all the time. But surprisingly, and we're going to talk about this in your waiver column, your 5 pickups that we're going to talk about, Elijah Mitchell was the one who actually started. He was the 6th round draft pick. He was the 3rd back, 4th back, whatever it was. And then Trey Sermon was a healthy scratch inactive. Thoughts on Raheem Mostert as well as Elijah Mitchell, which I know you're going to talk about, as well as Trey Sermon.
Well, Jed, we're sitting at the airport in Kenya. When Tommy says, I'm going to play Raheem Mostert over Austin Eckler. I was like, I don't know about that. I mean, like, Raheem Mostert is good, but you can't replace Austin Eckler for him. And my thing is, Mostert always gets injured. There's not been a year in the last few years where he's finished the entire season.
Yeah, I feel so bad. Mostert is such a talent, but boy, what a story! This Elijah Williams guy out of nowhere. Everyone scrambled to the waiver wire. The funny thing is, there's a couple other E. Williams, so I saw some teams pick up the wrong E. Williams. And so, but what a great story! And again, I'm such a fan of the 49ers backfield. Whoever is coming out of there is going to get production. I've got Trey Sermon on a couple teams. I was really surprised to see he didn't get to play. I still think he's going to end up over even Elijah Williams, but I think Elijah is going to get you 4, 5, maybe 6 games before Trey Sermon takes over.
Now, Jed, I will probably say that you look at numbers, right? And I'm looking at it. Eckler is injured with a hamstring. They're playing a Washington football team. They have a great, great defensive line, linebackers, everything like that. You look at San Francisco, Raheem Mostert is playing Detroit Lions. You're purely looking at the numbers, and so you make an educated guess right there. It just didn't work.
Yeah, no. I don't discount that decision because Mostert, I think, had he not been injured, he would have had all that production that Williams got. So I don't think that was a bad call. But again, I will mention one thing, Jimmy, we talked about. I just want to say this: don't get too wrapped up in all the stuff that happened this week. The first 2 weeks of the season are always a screwed up part of the season because they're still figuring things out, especially after COVID. They just haven't had enough time to really get into seeing the patterns and the trends that you can bank on in fantasy. So, take it a little easy, take a breather. If you got killed this weekend, if you had Aaron Rodgers and your team got destroyed, don't worry. Just kind of sit and see what happens.
Yeah, look, I would say this, and then we'll turn over to Jimmy's 5 wire pickups as well too. Jed, I'm playing against these guys from Japan. Many of them don't know anything about fantasy football, right? And so I miss my draft because of the change in time zones, and I am dead last in this group, and it is embarrassing.
Hey, you know what? One of my favorite fantasy stories is I was predicted by the DraftKings to be last. And so I started the season and was in 10th and started slow, but made it all the way back to win the championship. So that's actually, I think, one of the most rewarding things if you can pull that off.
Well, last year, last year I would say this. I was 8-8, and Jimmy knows this is, and you have I won the championship. You have an opportunity to do all that.
Okay, let me ask you guys something, right? Elijah Mitchell is right out there. And like you said, everyone's scrambling to pick him up, right? Yeah. And so if you have let's say, a Ryan Tannehill as quarterback or somebody mid-level, if it was you, would you spend your first waiver wire pickup on an Elijah Mitchell or a Jameis Winston from the Saints?
Oh, for me, running back all day long. Running back all day long. I actually am debating. So in our league, the league that the three of us are in together, we have a short bench. We only have 4 bench spots. I'm currently holding 1 bench spot for my backup quarterback. I've been debating if I should drop him. But it's Joe Burrow, and Joe Burrow, I feel like could hit.
I like Joe Burrow. He looked good.
He did. I was really that was an interesting surprise in that game. If we're going to go game by game, I was really pleased to see his play, because if you had been following preseason, you might have thought he was still hurt and he was still tentative. But man, he came out gangbusters, and then so did Jamar Chase.
Yeah. No, I agree with you.
I have waiver wire pickup number 1, all right? And I Ryan Tannehill as my quarterback. I'm picking up Elijah Mitchell because you still have Trey Sermon, you still have Justin Fields, you still have all of those guys coming up the pipeline here.
So you're picking up Elijah Mitchell. That means I need to change my waiver wire priority because I'm not getting him then.
Jim, let's go to your 5 wire pickups that you recommend for this week.
All right, so here's my 5 waiver wire pickups, right? Tyson Williams, we talked about him. He's been somebody who I was picking up across the board. So early on, I saw that he was having a really good preseason. So on some of my 12-team leagues, I was like, he's a good pickup. Then it worked to my favor because Justice Hill got injured. Gus Edwards got injured, and all of a sudden, now he's the number 1 running back for the Baltimore Ravens. So yesterday, Monday Night Football, he rushed 9 times for 65 yards. He caught 3 balls for 29 yards and 1 touchdown. So he had a great first half. My only concern is if you watch the second half, Murray started taking a bulk of the carries. And so I don't know if that's indicative of what's going on. Like you said, Jed, everyone's still trying to figure this stuff out. I am concerned, right? I wasn't concerned when they signed Le'Veon Bell or Freeman. I am concerned because Murray's a pretty good backup. And my concern is that Tyson Williams will not be the true number 1. I think he'll be the starter, but he might lose a lot of carries and catches to Murray.
That's exactly what's going to happen. I mean, they were already kind of a running back by committee team, and this is just going to further that. And so, unfortunately, it's going to split, some of the carries between Murray and Williams. But of the two, I think Williams is definitely the one to own. He had much more explosion. He had much more. I mean, Murray, if you saw, he got stopped behind the line several times. And so, part of that is that Murray needs to get back into acclimated, to the team and things. But I would expect Williams to be the one to own.
I think Williams will be this year's James Robinson. He might not have as really good of a year as Robinson because Robinson finished off so well. But you know what? This guy came out of nowhere. He was undrafted. I remember when they picked him up and off the wire when they signed him the Ravens, right? And when he became the starter, ESPN, when they were talking about him, they were like, "We have no clue who he is," because he's hopped around so much. There's no real footage of him as a player. Okay, so we talked about Elijah Mitchell, 19 rushes for 104 yards, 1 touchdown. My only concern, and again, we talked about this, I do know that whoever plays as a starter will do well. You've got Trey Sermon lurking in the background. And so for me, I think he's a good waiver wire pickup. You just have to be ready that a guy like Trey Sermon may end up becoming last year's Cam Akers, right? So they had a running back committee for the first couple games for the first half, and then towards the second half, they just kept feeding it to Cam Akers. So I think that's what you're going to see with Trey Sermon.
But the only thing, according to Adam Schefter, Trey Sermon did not do enough compared to Elijah Mitchell, who did so well during the preseason game and all that. He ascended past Trey Sermon on the depth chart, and that's why he was a healthy scratch from the game.
Yeah. Weren't you guys surprised when I was walking and we were walking in the airport security, and all of a sudden I was like, "Oh, Trey Sermon's out." And so I thought he was actually injured, but to see that he's a healthy scratch, that's really telling for them to scratch him on the first game. But again, you never know these things.
Yeah. Well, your third one.
Number 3, Jameis Winston. I think a lot of people are going to go after him, especially if you have a Ryan Tannehill as quarterback, right? He's still out there. 5 touchdowns, 14 to 20 yards, 14 to 20 with 148 yards, 0 interceptions. And I actually think he'll end up doing pretty well in this Saints system. I've been pleased by how many potential fantasy folks are coming out of the Saints.
Yeah. Okay. I would agree with you on. Go ahead.
Before you do, let me ask you guys a question. Let's say Ryan Tannehill. Totally understand. Jim, if you had Kyla Murray like I would, Would you trade Kyler Murray and pick up Jameis Winston?
No.
No,
you wouldn't do it.
Not Kyler.
Dude,
No,
Kyler Murray is.
You see how good that guy was?
Yeah,
he was a stud.
Yeah.
But I think you could trade him for, let's say, another player and get to someone like that.
Well, if you're ready to trade him to me. I'll take him because I think Murray is. I think you could ride Murray to a championship. This guy's looking great.
I mean, look. I mean, like you said, right? Like Josh Allen was the number 2 quarterback drafted, and he did not do anywhere near what Kyler Murray did. So I mean, I'm glad I picked him up, but I would not trade him.
Well, it's the first, again, it's the first week. Let's just see how things pan out. Kyler Murray had a great game. I think he's going to have a great season, but I don't think you can expect 5 touchdowns every Sunday. Jameis Winston, though, I'll say I totally agree. I think he has a chance to crack into the top 10 on the quarterback side. The big thing is 0 interceptions. That was really impressive. And if you watched him, there were a couple times he would have normally chucked it in there on the scramble, and he didn't. He threw it away. I think that's a very good sign. I think what's surprising to me is the who was catching the passes. I thought Callaway would be much more involved. He was not. It was to this tight end we were talking about, and so that I think was the big surprise. But I think the Saints offense is in good shape. So if you got Saints players, I think you should be happy.
Yeah. Okay, so I got 3. No, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. No, I seriously was thinking about trading Kyler Murray for someone like AJ Brown. I was thinking about making that trade.
Jed, we know who to trade for now.
Yeah, I wouldn't do that. No, I don't think. I mean, if you were going to trade for like maybe a top 10 running back, that might be something I would do. But man, Murray had in our league, I think he had 40 points alone.
40
points. Yeah. Okay, I got 2 more. So Kenyon Drake is actually somebody who I've been watching on the waiver wire and still available out there. He had six carries for 11 yards. But he caught 11 balls for 59 yards as well, too. Now, the only concern here is Jacobs, when they were at the goal line, they fed it to him, and he had 2 touchdowns as well, too. But he only rushed for 30-something yards as well, too. So I actually think they're going to include Kenyon Drake into this offense.
Yeah, I think this is a factor of Derek Carr. If you watch Derek Carr, man, this guy – it's amazing. He has poor accuracy. He missed so many players throughout the game, but his calling card is the last 2 minutes. He suddenly becomes like Mr. Wonderful and he can't miss. But I think because of that, you're going to see exactly what you said. I think there's going to be a lot of drop downs, and so there'll be a lot of passes to be caught there for Kenyon Drake.
Darren Waller saved that guy. I mean, that guy, he was great last night.
No, Brian Edwards saved that guy.
But Waller is such a stud. Like, you realize they were double teaming him throughout the game, and he still got over 100 in his touchdowns. I mean, that's unbelievable.
Okay, I know this is number 2. This is week 1, right? But aren't you reconsidering now the value of your tight end, right? If you got a Waller and a Kelsey this week, I didn't see what Kittles did, right? But if you had a Waller and Kelsey on your team, you had some good production coming from the tight end.
Well, like we've said all preseason, this is the first year you could start 2 tight ends in your lineup and people won't laugh you out of the house. You could put that tight end in that flex spot, and that's not necessarily a bad play. Yeah.
And then, like Tommy said, Brian Edwards, I actually 4 for 5. I don't know what's going to happen. I mean, Henry Ruggs did pretty good. Waller did pretty good. But for 81 yards yesterday, I actually think that he might be a pretty decent player for you to pick up in this waiver wire. So, but a couple other players, I mean, we don't have time to talk about them. Juwan Johnson, who's slated as both a wide receiver and tight end, somebody to look at from the Saints. Rondale Moore from the Cardinals. Tim Patrick from Denver, especially now that Jerry Judy is going to be out. Tony Pollard. I mean, I was surprised how much they used Tony Pollard in week 1. And then also Deontay Harris, the speedster out of the Saints. He caught, 2 touchdowns, over 100 yards. Those are people for me to look out for, especially as we're looking at this week.
One I'll add is Christian Kirk on Arizona Cardinals. Again, if you're picking up off of Murray's game, Kirk had 2 touchdowns. Now, he's always been kind of up and down, but again, that passing game there is, if it continues at that pace, there should be a lot of balls to go around.
No, I disagree with you, Jed. Wait till AJ Green gets his legs under him. All right, we'll wait till he gets his legs.
No, that's the thing. AJ Green it pretty much looks like he did last year, which is he looks like he's done.
Yeah. Were you guys surprised how much they ended up using James Conner in the Arizona offense? kind of had a decent game. Like I would consider looking at playing him in some of these 12-team leagues that I have.
Yeah. Hey, let's go through and preview all of the games as well, too, with our time that we have left. Jim, let's start with Philadelphia Eagles 32-6 against the Atlanta Falcons.
Yeah.
Look, Jalen Hurts did a great job, threw for 3 touchdowns. Miles Sanders had 74 yards. And Devontae Smith actually had 71 yards and 1 touchdown. What thoughts on that?
That's going to be, if I have one regret this year, it might be not picking up Hurts in some of these leagues, because there have been a couple of times where I was like, oh, should I just look at Hurts as a backup player, or should I keep him in some of these teams where I have to keep like 13 or 14 players, right? And so I actually think Hurts, the Eagles, is going to do pretty well. I think Smith actually had a better, more productive day than I thought.
Yeah, I was surprised at how big of a win this was for the Eagles. I thought the Falcons would show better, so that was a little concerning. The Falcons offense usually you can count on, but really it was the Falcons run game that was there. The passing game was just really non-existent. So that was a little surprising, but I would still, I like the Eagles. I still like Miles Sanders. I know he didn't have as great of a game here, but I still think the Eagles run game will be okay. I'm still not totally sold on both Hurts, or a Devonta Smith. So we'll just see. Again, it's one game. Let's see if they can continue the trend. But that was a surprising.
The one person I would potentially look out at is Kenneth Gainwell, the backup running back. He rushed 9 times for 37 yards. He's going to be the backup for Boston Scott, taking over for Boston Scott, right? So if anything ever happens to Sanders, I can see Gainwell actually doing a decent job from a fantasy standpoint.
Yeah, on the Atlanta team, Matt Ryan, 164 yards. Mike Davis did nothing, 15 carries, 49 yards. Calvin Ridley and Kyle Pitts have about 5-4 catches, but about 50-30 yards. So not too much as well, too. Hey, let's go over to the Jets. They lose to the Carolina Panthers 14-19. In terms of Zach Wilson, he threw for 2 touchdowns. Rushing, nothing good. It was spread out between Coleman as Ty Johnson and Michael Carter. But Corey Davis, 97 yards, 2 touchdowns. I know you're a fan.
Jed, I will say, when I saw that, I was like, Jed was right. Corey Davis, wow, that guy.
I was pimping him all preseason. Yeah. I have him on 2 teams, started him. The guy blew up. If you had been listening to the preseason stuff, they just said he locks in on Corey Davis. And remember, Davis had some nice production in his years in Tennessee. So if you have a chance, again, that could be a waiver wire pickup.
That was a good call. That was a great call, Jed.
Yep. Carolina Panthers, Sam Darnold did okay, but it was Christian McCaffrey. He was truly the number 1 wonderful first-round draft pick, and he did very, very good. Did not disappoint. DJ Moore, Robbie Anderson didn't do very much, but Carolina, you could ride Christian McCaffrey and have no concerns with them going this year.
Guys, the one player to watch out for is Terrence Marshall, right? He's, the 3rd or 4th wide receiver. He had the 2nd most targets after DJ Moore. And I actually think that if you look at the rest of the season, he's actually going to be somebody who's going to make an impact.
Yeah. LA Chargers against the Washington football team. Jed, love your thoughts on that. Chargers win 2016 against the Washington football team. The Chargers, Herbert did okay, threw for 1 touchdown. Eckler did okay. He was slightly injured, Keenan Allen, but it was Mike Williams, 82 yards, 1 touchdown. What do you think of a Mike Williams?
Yeah, so this is the one thing I'll say. I was worried because I was like, man, what's going on with the Chargers offense? But don't forget, this Washington defense is really amazing. Yeah. And to me, this shows the maturity of a Justin Herbert to be able to pull this game out and, as you saw, win it in the 4th quarter. So this, to me, is actually a good sign. Even though you didn't get great production from your Chargers skill players, I'm still expecting that ascension. I've got Herbert as a starter on 1 team, and I agree with you. I think Williams might be the guy. So Williams was a late pickup for a lot of people as well. Yeah. And so, that could be excellent production later.
If you looked at it, Herbert could have had a better day. A couple of the receivers dropped some near touchdowns, and if they got that, he would have had a great day. But I actually, like you, I agree. I think they'll be fine.
Yeah, going to the Washington football team, look, my entire team is built on the Washington football team. So I struggled, lost all my games because Antonio Gibson did okay. McLaren didn't do very much. Logan Thomas had 3 catches for 30 yards, 1 touchdown. I've struggled this week because I'm riding so much on the Washington football team. Jim, thoughts on that?
Here's the thing. If I had a chance today to potentially trade for Gibson and you can get him maybe at a lower value, I actually think that he would be a good trade. Because think about it, right? Now with Fitzpatrick out, they're going to have to rechange their offense. Instead of going downfield with speed, they're going to have to go for the running game and short down the middle passes. And so for me, if I can potentially get Gibson for a little bit cheaper and get give out another player, I might actually really look at it, but I actually have high hopes for Gibson and Logan Thomas. I'm a little worried about McLaren, though.
I was just going to say that, Tommy. If you want to trade Gibson, I'm open. But as you see these games again, especially these first 2 weeks, if you see a team that gets blown out, like Atlanta right now, for example, if someone's holding on to Kyle Pitts, they're probably worried right now. That is a good chance to jump in and be like, hey, do you want to trade for Kyle Pitts? Like, just trade on people's nerves. Get someone low that you're still banking on later is going to come out.
But here's going back though, Jed, I agree with you, right? But if you're listening to this podcast, don't overreact because you're going to look at a Pitts, you're going to look at a Gibson, you're going to accept some of these trades, and then you're going to realize, oh shoot, what did I did? And so, I mean, you could take advantage of people. But if you're also the person who's new to this, I was like, don't overreact with some of these players.
Yeah, don't make any moves your first 2 weeks. Remember your first 2 weeks. It's just a little bit crazy out there. And then the third week, you really start seeing consistent trends. So that's the thing to look out for.
Yeah.
I've thrown some offers for Aaron Jones. I would just say that to some people who are desperate. All right.
I mean, even like Josh Allen, you can trade for a Josh Allen right now because there might be a couple of people out there like, oh, he didn't do too well, I'll give him up.
Yeah. Jed, San Francisco 41 against the Detroit Lions 33. We talked about it. Raheem Mostert was the one that was injured, but surprisingly, the surprise scratch was Brandon Ayuk was a surprise scratch with Devontae Samuel going out for 189 yards and 1 touchdown. Thoughts on the San Francisco game?
Yeah, I mean, Deebo Samuel, awesome, But again, we've said this all along. That offense can get clicking, and so that was a good thing to see. Actually, the points to put up. And so Deebo Samuel, I think he might actually be out there. You might be lucky, you might be sitting out there, but Deebo, and I would expect Brandon Ayuk. It was was it injury related for him to be out?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I would expect him to come back at some point. But again, it's always with both those players, again, injuries are just something you have to watch out for. But I'm high on the 49ers. I think the 49ers could win their division this year. They were killed by injuries last year. So, let's see. With obviously Mostert's not a good start, but I think they could come back. The big thing here to me in this game, though, was Detroit. Detroit came back. They almost won this game. This is not, they didn't just get crushed and then get garbage time points. They almost came back. So I was impressed. Jared Goff, I actually started to bring them back. If you had DeAndre Swift, he paid out for you, man. Swift had a great game. So that was and TJ Hawkinson too. So that was what was surprising to me is how well Detroit played.
338 yards, 3 touchdowns, 1 interception. The thing that was telling is the receivers. The receivers did not do well, right? Like I was thinking maybe a Tyrell Williams will come out and do well. None of those receivers did well. So what you had Hawkinson, you had Jamal Williams, and you had DeAndre Swift. And I actually can see this being something that they're going to push is just lining up and then going after some of these short passes to those 3 players.
Yeah. And if Jamal Williams is somehow sitting on your waiver wires, make sure it looks like it's going to be even split between Williams and DeAndre Swift, with Swift also getting a lot of got a lot of catches out of the backfield as well, too.
Well, I mean, were you guys surprised? Williams actually was the starter in this game ahead of DeAndre Swift.
Yeah, I didn't see that. That is surprising. But Swift, again, the catches out of the backfield is where he makes his money. In most leagues, he should have been up around 20 points. So it was a pretty good day for him.
ESPN said that was the one surprising thing is how many passes they threw to him and out of the backfield. And that's, again, something for us to really watch out for. But, yeah, he might actually – I mean, he surprised me. I was losing some hope on him towards the end of the preseason.
Jim, Pittsburgh wins against the Buffalo Bills 23-16. The surprising thing is Najee Harris only had 45 yards, no touchdowns. And amongst the receiving, it was a spread out between Claypool, Deontay Johnson, and J.J. Smith-Schuster in terms of 3-3-4 catches. And it was spread out pretty well. And so a lot of times, thoughts on the Pittsburgh Steelers?
I think this is one of those things where I have to not overreact, Jed, because I picked up Najee Harris in a number of these dynasty leagues, and he was my first person when I could have gotten into Kyler Murray or Josh Allen out there. But I have to remember this is the first game. He's going to be fine. I wish that he had more of a better production. But I also remember last year, Hilaire came out and did pretty well in the first couple games, and he fizzled out, right? So I'm hoping that what you're going to start seeing is Harris eventually become a stud running back, but I'm hopeful for him.
Yeah, again, remember the Bills' defense is really good. So it's not surprising that all of the Steelers' skill players didn't get great points. I agree with you. I think it's a good sign that the Steelers pulled it out and actually won the game. So that I think is more encouraging than anything for Pittsburgh. For Buffalo, I don't know, a little bit of a hangover from their great season last year, but I would expect them to turn it around because I had Stephon Diggs sitting on there. I was so close to benching him, and I should have. I think the Bills will bounce back.
Yeah, Stephon Diggs, 9 catches, 69 yards. Zach Moss, again, not a healthy scratch, but surprise scratch with Devin Singletary at 72 yards as well, too.
I still think Zach Moss is going to end up contributing by the end of the season. I was actually surprised that he's going to be a scratch, but I think Zach Moss is somebody for you to at least pay attention to.
Jed, I'm actually going to go with you. Seattle Seahawks, 28-16 against the Indianapolis Colts. Russell Wilson did really well, 4 touchdowns. The surprising thing, Chris Carson did pretty well. The surprising thing is Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf, you're going to constantly see this back and forth all the time where Metcalf has these blow-up games, but he only had 60 yards with 1 touchdown, but it was Lockett with 100 yards with 2 touchdowns.
Yeah, I wouldn't be worried about that at all. If you know Seattle, you should not be surprised. First half of the season, they go nuts airing the ball out. And so Russell Wilson, if you watched highlights from this game, long bomb from the goal line after goal line, that's all he was doing. And Lockett is perfect for that. But I still think Metcalf was not featured, still produced for you. Got a touchdown, got 60 yards. To me, I still think he's the wide receiver to own over the two of those. If you have a Lockett and you want to trade him while he's high, someone wants him, you could make some money off of that. To me, long-term, DK Metcalf is the guy to own. This game for me was not unexpected out of Seattle about the production that I expected. I think the concern is the Colts side. I was surprised that the Colts didn't get better production and weren't more in this game, especially being at home. And so that to me was a little concerning.
Michael Pittman didn't do anything. I actually thought he would at least turn in a pretty decent outing, but he did not do anything for me.
I will say that Nahim Hines, who I talked about all preseason, he had a decent outing. He had, I think, 11, 12 points because he was catching a lot out of the backfield, which is exactly what we said would give. Just like DeAndre Swift, these backs that can catch out of the backfield, especially if you're in a PPR league or even in a half point per league, which a lot of standard leagues now are going to half point per reception. It just ups their value. And so I think a Nahim Hines, even though he's the second back, he has value.
The other player that came out, I was hopeful for, Gerald Everett, the tight end from Seattle. He only had 20 yards catching, but he got a touchdown. And so for somebody who's low on your tight end and you don't have anybody, he's out there. He might be worth a tight end pickup this week.
And just correction on that is Gerald Everett, who originally came from LA, and then from that point on is now in the system in which former LA coach is offensive coordinator for the Seattle Seahawks as well too. For Indianapolis, Jonathan Taylor had 17 rushing for 56 yards. He has 6 catches for 60 yards. But then look at Zach Pascal with 43 yards, but 2 touchdowns as well too. Carson Wentz has not really played with this team. He had COVID, then he was injured, and let's see what happens in the next 2 weeks.
Yeah, agree.
All right, Jim, let's go with Minnesota against the Cincinnati Bengals in overtime, in which the Cincinnati Bengals wins 27-24. The big star of the game was actually Joe Burrow, came back from his knee injury to throw for 2 touchdowns, and Joe Mixon, who had a disappointing year, had 127 yards. Jamar Chase, who everyone criticized, had 101 yards.
Yeah. In a dynasty league where I had to pick up 5 players, I did not keep Joe Mixon. And I'm rethinking that strategy now because I went for all the receivers and left Joe Mixon off my lineup. He actually had a good game. I am pleased with Jamar Chase. I picked him up in middle of a number of these drafts, thinking that he might be an okay pickup. I might consider playing him this week as my wide receiver 1 because I think he showed he's going to be a pretty decent fantasy player this year.
Yeah, this was an impressive win for me. For Cincinnati, I was worried about Joe Burrows, but he looked great. I watched this game. It was a great game. He showed good poise. I agree. Mixon looked really, really good. But again, Mixon, you gotta just wait and see because what ends up happening is Cincinnati ends up having to be behind and throwing well. And so what happened was their defense really stepped up. The Cincinnati defense, they invested a lot in it. So if they're in a lot closer games, that's to Joe Mixon's favor. So he could have a really good year this year. Mm-hmm. I think on the Vikings side, I was just disappointed. I felt like the passing game was really not clicking. And this has been always my biggest concern with the Vikings. You can count on Dalvin Cook. You can count on the running game, but Kirk Cousins is he's too streaky. He's just not consistent enough. So I was just excited to not see the Vikings pull this one out.
Yeah, and we've talked about it all summer as well too. Justin Jefferson is your number 1 wide receiver. It now frees up Adam Thielen, and he had it in 9 catches, 92 yards, and 2 touchdowns, and he did pretty well as well too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All right, Jaguars loses to surprisingly the Houston Texans, 21-37. Brandon Cook did really, really well. Jim, thoughts on that? And Mark Ingram seems like the running back that emerges out of that crowded backfield.
Look, I know no one picked up Mark Ingram because I see him in all the waiver wires. He's somebody to look at. Now, am I confident that Houston's going to continue winning games? I'm pretty sure I'm not. But at least for the first game, Brandon Cooks, Tyrod Taylor, as well as also Mark Ingram did decent. If you need a running back, he's actually somebody decent that you want to pick up. I'm also hopeful because Trevor Lawrence had a really good game. I think he had 28, 29 fantasy points in some of these leagues. So I don't know if there's anybody else I would really want to play, but Trevor Lawrence is somebody to pay attention to on the Jaguars.
Yeah, I was counting on the Jaguars to win this game. So yeah, I think everyone counted it. Yeah, everyone counted on the Texans to just, shut the season down with the mess with Deshaun Watson. But Tyrod Taylor really showed, he's in the league for a reason. I agree with you. I think matchup dependent is where you can pick up some of these guys and get points off the Houston Texans. And I agree. I think Brandon Cooks is probably the number 1 guy to own there. I think the running backs, it's tricky. Yeah, maybe a Mark Ingram. I was surprised David Johnson. I picked him up in a couple of leagues. I was surprised he didn't get more attempts. So, but just again, this is to me one of those where, okay, they scored 37 points. I wouldn't be surprised if Houston doesn't score 37 points again for the rest of the season.
I mean, the hard part with Mark Ingram, right? I can see him doing pretty good, but you've got a couple other running backs behind you. And Mark Ingram is old. And so I don't see this production moving forward. And so if you have a waiver wire and you're trying to consider, should I pick up a Mark Ingram? I would not pick him up as your number 1 pickup for this week. There are other better players out there.
Yeah, the other thing I'll mention on the Jag side is I was disappointed in James Robinson. I had him penciled in as a starter. He actually had half the carries of Carlos Hyde. And so I think that was concerning to me that, they're not featuring the guy. So we'll just have to see again. Maybe that was part of game flow and the fact that they got behind early. And so then they had to abandon the running game. But I'll be watching that one closely because I was counting on James Robinson.
Yes, and that's a great point because watch week 2, because if they continue to do that, then be concerned. But maybe they were down so much, they just had to start airing out the ball, and that might be it as well, too.
Well, I don't know him, but Urban Meyer, he seems to me like he's a pretty arrogant coach. And so a lot of people are saying that he's going to be like another Nick Saban, right? He thinks he can come into the league. He thinks he can do all of these different things and win games. But what he's realized is this is a different ball game, right? And so unless he goes back to a consistent Trevor Lawrence, James Robinson, Marvin Jones, DJ Chark, instead of trying to find different ways to win, he might keep losing some of these games like he did to Houston.
Arizona Cardinals, Jim, 38 against the Tennessee Titans, 13. Kyler Murray was the star of the show, but at the same time, we expect it from DeAndre Hopkins. Christian Kirk did really, really well. 70 yards, 2 touchdowns, and there seems to be a split between Chase Edmonds as well as James Conner.
Yeah, he's a stud. I mean, I think everyone kind of knew Kyler Murray was going to have a pretty good year. I think what people were really trying to figure out is who's going to end up being the number one running back. And at least based off of game one, you realize there most likely will be a split between Connors as well as Chase Edmonds. I think on the other side, the Titans are the one that maybe worries me, right? If I had Ryan Tannehill, I want to start looking at game two. Are they going to be able to bounce back from a fantasy production and do better? Because I think I was watching social media and all my Titan friends are saying, I can't believe we waited all season for this, because they have lots of potential. They got Julio Jones, they got A.J. Brown, they got Derrick Henry. And you would think that Tannehill would have had a better fantasy production, but going into the second quarter, he threw 1 touchdown towards the end of the second quarter, but really up until then, he didn't do anything.
Yeah, this was disappointing. Again, though, I think the Titans historically are a slow starting team, especially Derrick Henry. You feel like the first half of the season is when you don't get as great a production out of him. So I'm not totally surprised, but I agree with you. I have Tannehill starting in one league. And so it's something you need to watch, because if he's not going to pick up the pace, you're going to have to replace him.
And Tom, my advice, don't trade Murray. He's going to be a stud this year. There's no value in picking anybody out than trading Murray.
Yeah. With that said, don't underestimate the importance of Arthur Smith, who is their offensive coordinator, who went over to Atlanta. Now, with that said, Julio Jones, are any of you guys starting him in week 2?
Who are they playing?
You know what? I don't know.
Yeah. As you're looking, here's my thing, right? Again, there are some good players out there who didn't do too well, or who did so well that you can either trade for him or trade that person to somebody else.
Yeah, they're playing Julio
Jones. Yeah, Julio Jones is somebody I actually would consider going after with a trade, because I actually think you can get some good value if you traded somebody for him right now.
Yeah, that should be a shootout of a game next week with the Seahawks. So I would expect the Titans to have to air it out, which means that Julio should be in the mix. So I wouldn't have a problem starting Julio next week.
Chad, Miami Dolphins wins against the New England Patriots 17-16. And for that game, look, Myles Gaskin did okay. Devontae Parker seemed to be star of the show. Jalen Waddle got 61 yards, 1 touchdown. And also on the New England side, Matt Jones did decently well, 281 yards, 1 touchdown. But the star of the game seems to be Aguilar as well as Damian Harris.
Yeah, I was going to say Damian Harris, that's someone that we all talked about. I drafted him, actually started him in one team. And so it played out. I mean, it's kind of predictable with the Patriots. They're not going to depend too much on Mac Jones. And so the running game is going to be really key. And so it was good to see Damian Harris get the vast majority of the carries and to be able to hit 100 yards. Disappointing they didn't win the game. But again, I think this is going to be an up and down year for New England. And New England, if you know this division, they have such a hard time with Miami. In fact, I think Brady on New England only beat the Dolphins once, I want to say, had a winning record against the Dolphins in a season. So the Dolphins always play New England really tough, and so I wasn't surprised there.
The only thing I was thinking about is Jacoby Myers. I actually thought would be a better pickup and do better, but thus far in game one, he didn't do too well. But I actually am hopeful for him, because if he does end up playing and plays well and lives up to his potential, that's a good 11 to 12 points in your fantasy that you can count on.
Yeah. Chip, let's go over to Denver Broncos against the New York Giants. Broncos win 27-13. On that one, Bridgewater did decently well. Melvin Gordon actually had 101 yards. We talked about Jerry Judy. And on the Giants, look, Saquon Barkley did nothing. And as we expected, Kenny Galladay did nothing as well, too.
Yeah. Watch. This is my bet. You're going to start seeing a couple people start dropping Jamal Williams in Denver. And this is where I'm going to start monitoring the running back from Denver.
The running back, Denver, Jamal Williams.
Yeah, Jamal Williams. I actually think that there are some people out there who's not paying attention and they're going to drop him. And that's where I'm going to scoop him up because, yeah, Gordon did well. And I think he'll be fine in the next couple of games. But I do think Williams is going to be the future of this running back to this position.
That's a really good suggestion, Jimmy. I really like that because if you look at the carries, the attempts, Jamal Williams had 14 to Melvin Gordon had 11. So you get one of the things to look at for those of you who are new. Always look at carries and attempts. So attempted passes and attempted carries, because that tells you what the team wants to do, even if the production doesn't follow. And so this shows you that they're saying we want Jamal Williams to actually do better than Gordon in the end. And so to Jimmy's point, this is a good time to strike early.
The targets and the attempts, like you're right. And people are, like we keep saying, people are going to make emotional decisions. They're going to look at Melvin Gordon. They're going to see that he rushed for 100-something yards. They're going to drop Williams and go after somebody like a Mark Ingram. And this is where you can go and pick him up, and he might potentially win your fantasy.
Just a quick clarification. Jamal Williams is actually with Detroit. Javonte Williams is with the Denver Broncos.
Javonte
Williams.
Yeah.
All right. Green Bay, surprisingly, Jed, loses to the New Orleans Saints. The star of the game was not Aaron Rodgers, but more so Jameis Winston, who threw for 5 touchdowns, but only 148 yards.
Yeah, I watched this game, and there was definitely something wrong with the Packers. They could not get going. And you know what? The Saints, got to give the Saints defense some credit. The Saints defense was the coverage was especially tight on the back end. So I think that's kind of what really won the game for them. But on the New Orleans Saints side, again, as I said, you got to feel really good about Jameis Winston. I said this all along. If you remember the guy's production in Tampa, he had some really stellar years. He just threw way too many interceptions. If they keep that down, that offense can really, this could be the next new, this could be an easy transition from Drew Brees for the Saints.
Yeah. Hey, Jed, we didn't watch the game, but I looked at Jordan Love had seven attempts. Did they just replace him toward the end?
Yeah. It's towards the end of the game. They just got him in. And, I actually didn't watch the very last quarter, so I don't know if he, came in just for garbage time. But Rodgers looked, it was interesting. You could tell he was just frustrated, but they were not clicking. Like there were a couple missed routes. But the defense, again, the coverage was really, really tight. And I felt like Rodgers didn't have the time he normally had. They also really abandoned the running game. Aaron Jones did not get many attempts, and they didn't establish the run early. And so then after that, it was kind of downhill.
Jim, Cleveland loses to the Kansas City Chiefs 29-33, or Kansas won 33-29. For me, look, Patrick Mahomes, Tyreek Hill, Travis Kelce. I actually was more frustrated on the Cleveland side. Odell Beckham was a scratch right at the last minute, and I actually had him on my starting lineup. Yeah, I had him on my starting lineup.
So I wanted to pick up Jarvis Landry, who's on the waiver wire in several leagues, and start him because I knew if you had been paying attention, you guys weren't here, so you didn't hear it. There was a lot of signs that OBJ was not going to play, and so that instantly pushed Landry up to the number one receiver, and you knew this was going to be a lot of points. I didn't have the guts to do it.
Is his injury serious? Is he going to play game 2?
I don't know, but it was clear to me going in that he wasn't going to be available for game 1.
Yeah. Chiefs are the Chiefs. I mean, they're gonna do well. I am surprised how well Tyreek Hill did, but it just shows that he might continue what he did last year as well too. But Travis Kelce, like he is always Mr. Consistency for me. I always end up regretting that I did not go harder after Travis Kelce.
Yeah. The only problem is Clyde Edwards-Helaire, 14 rushes, 43 yards, only 3 catches for 29 yards. He just does not seem to do well. He just is a disappointment all the time.
I don't blame him. I mean, to me, this is like the Cardinals too. Like the Cardinals backfield and the Kansas City backfield, you just can't expect huge production because they're passing teams. Like that's where the production is going to be, is in the passing game. And so I don't necessarily blame Helaire. I think he's doing what he can in the offense he's given.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, couple more before we wrap up. Rams wins against our Chicago Bears 34-14. Matthew Stafford did awesome. Justin Fields will continue to be clamored for to replace Andy Dalton. Jim, Jed, thoughts on the Bears against the Rams?
ESPN put Justin Fields as one of the top pickups for this week, and I actually really agree. And the other thing I told you was watch out for Cooper Kupp. And Cooper Kupp was the best wide receiver on that field, and I actually think that he's actually going to have a great season. The other player to really watch, that's the third receiver that they were using, Van Jefferson. He started showing some spark last year. I'm keeping an eye out on Van Jefferson and seeing what he does in the second game, but he's somebody for me to take a look at. But Cooper Kupp, I actually think is going to be your number one receiver out of the Rams.
Yeah, I don't agree. I still think
you don't like Cooper Kupp.
No, I mean, I think Cooper Kupp is going to be. I think he's going to be a good, productive player. I think you can have him on a team. I don't think he's going to be number one. I still think.
You still think Robert Woods will come out?
I still think Robert Woods. The main reason is, to me, the big thing that came out of this game is Matthew Stafford's arm is fine. He was throwing long bombs. There was discussion that maybe his arm was getting tired. They were going to go to maybe the short game. They totally did not. They were airing it out. There were big fireworks. This reminds me of Joe Burrow as well, where all the preseason reports. This is why you got to be careful when you read the preseason stuff, because a lot of it, the team is just hiding what they're going to do. Matthew Stafford is going to be a stud. If you got him, he has a chance to be top 5 in the quarterbacks. And this team looks really, really good. On the flip side for the Bears, Justin Fields actually played, guys. He got in. He scored a touchdown right from the goal line package. That was really good to see. I agree. I've got Fields sitting on one of my benches. He's definitely going to be there. It might happen. I was saying hopefully game 4, game 5. It might happen sooner than that, but he still looks good.
Yeah, I mean, we're all Chicago Bears fans. There is no way Nagy is going to be able to keep Fields off from playing. If they stink it up next week, he's going to come in the third game.
The other thing I'll say, Montgomery looked awesome. Montgomery looked so good. If you drafted Montgomery, it might have been outside of the top 10. He looked like a top 10 back, and this was against the Rams defense, so I was very impressed with that. If anyone is not high on Montgomery right now, trade for him because he looked great.
And just so you know, a lot of times there was some concern also with Sony Michel taking some carries. Darrell Henderson got 16 carries for 70 yards. And so a lot of times with Sony Michel only getting 1 as well, too.
Yeah. Okay.
Jim, I know you have. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah. Can I just say, during this conversation, in one of my leagues, someone dropped Cam Akers in a dynasty league. And I was like, what are they doing? So I just quickly placed a claim for him because I was like, look, and that's the thing. People are going to react this year, and they're going to keep dropping certain players. And I'm like, I'm not picking Cam Akers up for this year, but next year I'll pick him up and I'll stash him on my IR. So sorry.
Look, one thing I will say, Jed, you will always know with Jimmy. He will wake up at 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock in the morning, just so he could be the first person picking up, scrambling, grabbing players.
Smart.
3 o'clock. That's my waiver tonight. I'm going to set my alarm clock at 3 o'clock, and that's when I pick up all my guys.
Hey, last one before I know Jimmy has to run. Baltimore loses to the Las Vegas Raiders. It was a phenomenal game in overtime. Bryan Edwards did so well. Raiders win 33-27. Bryan Edwards was the star of the game. Darren Waller was the star of the game. Lamar Jackson did really, really well in terms of running, and Tyson Williams did very well.
The other person that I was surprised by who did decent was Marquis Brown. 69 yards receiving. With all of these receivers out for Baltimore, he might actually be somebody you might want to pay attention to. Sami Watkins is going to do his thing, but at least Marquis Brown is the person I'm paying attention to.
Yeah, actually, so for me, Watkins was the surprise. I thought even though he had fewer catches, he had some of the really key catches to keep them in that game. And they're playing, I think they're playing Kansas City next week. And so if they
it's a revenge
game.
Yeah,
so Watkins, I think, is someone you might want to start next week.
And Jed, that's going to be the end of Sami Watkins because that's what he always does.
Yeah, exactly. I totally agree. He's not. So I think Marquis Brown long term is the person to own. Although I will say I was really sad about Mark Andrews. This is why I actually, you guys know, I had Mark Andrews in Dynasty League. I dropped him. I just felt like the consistency was not there. And again, this game didn't have great production. So a little bit concerned.
He dropped a couple of easy balls. I mean, go back to Dallas, so did CeeDee Lamb, right? So those are the couple of players that I have on my league. And they could have had a great day if they stopped dropping those balls.
Yeah, and that is always the concern as well too. Is with Sami Watkins. That's why people aren't excited about him. He'll probably have a couple of great games, and next thing you know, he gets injured and he disappears.
That's Sami Watkins.
All right. Hey, I know we all have to run and get to our real day jobs, so we'll probably come back on Friday and preview week 2. And so, well, we'll talk Thursday or Friday. Either one of those days, we'll come back on and we'll preview week 2. All right.
Sounds
Any
great.
thoughts?
No.
All right.
Really good. Waiver wire starts Wednesday, so get up early and make sure you put in some good player claims.
Talk soon, everyone.
All right, bye.